I'm officially irritated by how badly they fumbled this movie. Anyways, this review is probably gonna be multiple parts because I need to talk about what Justin Tipping, the director, wanted to do versus what he actually did, and then I'm gonna talk about what he could have done. So, him is about Cameron Cade. Cameron Cade is an up and coming quarterback, up and coming, promising young quarterback. He gets the opportunity to train at the isolated compound of current GOAT Isaiah White. No sooner than Cameron gets to the isolated compound than things turn weird and dark and violent and bloody. This is a horror thriller, and it is not a good one. So it is, like I said, directed by Justin Tipping. It's written by Skip Bronke and Zach Akers, and also Justin Tipping. Fun fact, this movie was originally called GOAT. I am so curious about what the original, like, the first version of the screenplay, what that was. I don't imagine it was that much better. Like, I don't think, like, but this article says that Skip and Zach, it was their script, and then Justin Tipping put his touch on it. It didn't help anything. Going by some of the dialogue, as well as this interview with Justin Tipping, him wanted to tackle the question of how much are you willing to do to go pro? How much are you willing to sacrifice? It goes about answering that question in a very nonsensical way. Visually, this movie throws everything at us. I think going forward, if I see that a movie has more than 2 montages, it's an indication that it's gonna be a bad movie. Like, it's too stylistic. This movie is. It's choppy, it's sloppy, it's nonsensical. It doesn't have a clear foundation. It's as if these writers heard or saw some conversation online somewhere about the dark side of football and decided to write a story about it, but it's like they don't personally have a conviction about what is the dark side of football or even sports. But in the interview, Justin also says that he was inspired to create a project that at its core examines America's obsession with exhaustion economy. And he goes on to talk about how coming out of the pandemic or during the pandemic, he was working in television and he was pushing himself and he was missing birthdays and very hustle grind culture, right? Is the fundamental feeling, like I said, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to sacrifice to be great at what you do? He says it transcended this very niche thing of a quarterback in professional sports. It applied to me. He says the themes I was most interested in are what happens. So now so first it was, what are you willing to do to be great at what you are? What are you willing to sacrifice? Now we get into the second thing of what happens when the athlete becomes a commodity in the institution. If your body is your only capital and you get injured or you age out, you're just a warm body that is moved through spaces and is disposable. If that's the horrific underlying thing, I think there's a lot to explore there, except he doesn't explore anything there. So he says, but it's tackling all at once the business side of sports and the dark side of the business. It does neither. Like, we get visuals. Let's go. Let's dive in. Okay, so Justin Tipping's question is, what are you willing to sacrifice? The answer is nothing. And I'm not saying that because of how the movie ended. I'm saying that because of what happens in the movie. Cameron, I don't remember if he had a nickname, he's not sacrificing anything because his position is the quarterback. A question like that, and you're talking about, and you're using the game of football to explore it, give him another position that actually involves using his own body, like being the one tackled. Because if you haven't seen this movie yet, this movie that is trying to answer questions through the game of football doesn't feature a football game. We are not given a football game. There is no football team. Nothing. Cameron is having a solitary, individualized experience in this movie that is using a team sport to tell its story. Right away, disconnect. Cameron has to take ice baths and crap, but it's I would expect that what are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to sacrifice your body? Are you willing to sacrifice your health? Are you willing to sacrifice your mental acuity? And I'll get to more of that later on. But because of the position he gives them, because there's no actual game, he never really gets hurt. His body is never really on the line. Even when we talk about sacrifice, he's not even, well, because they want him to be the next GOAT, he's not even the one in danger of being sacrificed. And then when talking about the dark side of the business of sports and the dark side of business, there is no coach in this movie. Where's the coach? Where are the coaches? They bring in the owners towards the end and literally make them these cartoonish, like, cabal of evil who are, want him to sign the contract and basically sign his life away. And like the party where he's supposed to meet the owners of the team is literally like there's a sacrifice that's about to happen. I'm not sure how much of that he knows because it's a freaking montage. He might be under the influence. I don't know, but it's not well done. The question, what happens when the athlete becomes a commodity in the institution? Now, this is something that he could have explored through Marlon Wayans' character. Cameron is played by by Tyreek Withers. He could have explored that through Marlon Wayans' character. That's what I was expecting going through this movie. But he takes the place of the mentor, the coach, essentially. And there are instances where he's talking about what he had to give up, what he had to sacrifice, but the dialogue in this movie, like I said, it's choppy. He flips between, not a lot, but he flips between like kind of warning him to leave, but also thinking about how much you're willing to sacrifice. It's not good. So he doesn't really explore the reality of him aging out and becoming a commodity. The best we get is an literal in-your-face fight because he doesn't want to be replaced, even though that's why he brought him to the compound in the first place, was to train him up. You get the sense that the owners, like this is a tradition, the owners want him to battle it out, and the expectation is for Cam to win because the soul or the energy of past GOATs would then transfer into Cam, and that's how he would become the new prize animal. Athletes, the dark side of football is that like the athletes, especially the black athletes, I'm building up to that, are a commodity, or you can critique football as an institution where the black athletes are a commodity in the institution. But that's because there is no institution in this movie. There are no coaches, teams, games, etc., families. He doesn't set himself up. The writers don't set themselves up to be able to explore these in any way. We just get these weird shout outs. Like, for example, there's a scene where Cam is being like measured and evaluated, but it's in your face where he's completely naked, and in the background you hear the men talking about like his weight, his measurements, and blah blah blah. These writers, these three, didn't have the depth to explore this topic, which means that the topic is yet to be written, or at least yet to be greenlit, because we know how Hollywood works. Yet to be greenlit. So, the opportunity still exists, but it's not in this movie. Meet me in the next video so we can talk about what Justin Tipping could have done. Do you know what race norming is? And do you know about the NFL doing that up until 2021? Raise your hand if you've ever heard the institution of the NFL be compared to a plantation. Raise your hand if you've ever heard talk of racism in the NFL. Raise your hand if you've ever heard people critique the NFL and compare it to slavery in terms of the treatment of the black players. This is a case of like knowing a little bit about a lot. Welcome to part 2 of my review of him. In the first part, I talked about what the director wanted to do and how he failed to do it. Now I'm going to talk about what he could have done, because considering these critiques of the NFL, there was a goldmine of material that him and his writers could have used to give us a horror thriller about the dark side of the NFL and the dark side of the business of football. Raise your hand if you know what race norming is. Race norming. So in 2013, I'm referencing this article. In 2013, the NFL settled for $765 million after more than 4,500 retired players brought concussion-related lawsuits against the league. Okay, so they settled, and this settlement was meant to cover things like medical exams, further research, and legal fees for concussion-related neurological diseases like dementia, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, aka CTE. Okay, so they got sued, they settled. What was uncovered by some of the black players is that it was harder for them to access the settlement money because the NFL was doing this thing called race norming. It's race-based science, where they did cognitive tests on their players and then they adjusted the results for the black players because of their race. They basically adjusted it to make the statistics say that black players, because they're black, have diminished mental capacity, and so things like CTE, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and stuff like that doesn't affect them as much because they already have lower cognitive abilities compared to white players. They were doing that. Two players sued them in 2020, and then in 2021, the NFL said that it would stop doing the practice of race norming. So, with all that said, and then there's other stuff. So there's this other article, and looking up the stuff that was at these writers' disposal to create a horror thriller, that spotlights the NFL. There's also a study that was done by some anthropologists, I think they are. It talks about integration in the NFL, right? The high risk positions, people don't last in them as long because they're so high impact. Those positions went from being occupied by mostly white players, and then after integration, after the sport was integrated, now they're mostly occupied, or at least as of the time of this publication of the study, they're mostly occupied by black players. So those would be the positions like defensive back, defensive line, linebacker, running back, and wide receiver. Meanwhile, the low risk position, specifically quarterback, doesn't see as much integration. It's mostly white. Low risk, your body's not as on the line, and it's a more prized, pun intended, or whatever, more prized position, more respected, you get more deals, etc., etc., etc. So I read/skimmed it, and then there is a third article that I'll put on here. Oh, there's one called Plantation Logics at the NFL Combine. So this is what I mean. This is what I was getting at when I said in my spoiler-free review that I don't know that a Filipino-American director and two white writers had the capacity to do a horror thriller like this justice. I know I went over what Justin Tipping wanted to do, but they do a lame, they acknowledge, right? So like I said, there's a scene where Cameron is being talked about by, these white, I don't know what the hell they are, the staff, and they're talking about his measurements, but you hear it in the background. One of the owners calls him boy. So like, that's as far as they go with the race stuff and in the casting, because there's a reason why you cast two black men. You could have made this two white people. You could have made this a white man and a black man. You casted two black men, and please don't come here about Tyreek's biraciality. But it's fine that he was casted, honestly, because if this movie was going to be done correctly, he would have had to be a supporting player, a supporting character. If this was to be done correctly, they would have needed to cast a dark-skinned black man. And that's exactly why my spidey senses tingled when I first saw the trailer for this, because I'm like, if this is going to be exploring the dark side of football, this ain't the face to help with that like visceral reaction, because the imagery matters. Imagine Get Out with him. It wouldn't hit the same. It would not be as effective. this movie could have tackled the whole like what are you willing to do thing and show these players like play like it should have like yes a darker man being the main character, but have it be a team, have multiple show this story through multiple characters who are on this football team, show the economic factors, poor working class black boys coming straight out of high school, straight out of college with a dream of making it big and like in helping their family out. Show like where's the South, where are all of these things that have such a huge that make football what it is and help to uphold the culture. Where is the exploration of toxic masculinity and how these and you could write something where like these guys are like in a bubble. Having this be literally play out on an isolated compound, like come on. We could have had a story where like what are you willing to sacrifice and show like these injuries that are degrading, you know, these players' mental capacities, and maybe something like the CTE is making some of them maybe have this character Cam Cam over time becoming more and more disconnected from his body to where he becomes a sack of flesh, just getting hurt on the field for the love of the game, for the love of the fans, and the high that comes with that, and the prestige. And don't make him a quarterback. The prestige that comes with that. But we didn't get any of that. It is a huge missed opportunity because, like I said, they didn't have a good foundation for this. It doesn't seem like they could talk about the dark side of football, or even like what are you willing to do to do the thing you love to make it. It doesn't even this movie doesn't give me the sense that they could talk about this for like 2 hours straight. I give it 1 star out of 5.